okay, this is bad. This is really bad. Like, it's only been going on for a few days at the time of me recording this, and yet I argue that it's almost as bad as the border crisis that's been happening for 3.5 years now. You all know exactly what I'm talking about. It's about the 45,000 port workers under the union known as the ILA going on strike all over the East and Gulf coasts. Not only is this extreme because of how much it's costing us, but also because of their demands, at least on a surface level. We've got a lot to get into with this video today, a whole lot of statistics, how this affects America as a whole, etc., etc. But like my stepdad has always told me, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. Metaphorically speaking, let's take these statistics one piece at a time, shall we? But before we get into this, please make sure you subscribe, share this with your friends, hit that thumbs up button and notification bell, because everybody needs to know just how much magnitude these port strikes have. Now, I've been going through a lot of news outlets and articles regarding this strike that's been going on for a few days, and these are the numbers that I came up with. Let us first start with the average annual earnings of West Coast port workers, at least the longshore workers, according to PMAnet.org. If you look at this graph here in 2023, between the longshore, clerk, and foreman workers, the average annual earnings amounts to over $200,000. And don't even get me started on how high the annual earnings for the foremen are. Look at that, $331,000. These numbers are very important to keep in mind. Now, there's a possibility that I could be interpreting this graph incorrectly, but assuming that longshore men are actual port workers that do the actual manual labor of moving crates from boat to land, that should be considered an excellent comparison to what the East and Gulf coasts are doing for their workers. And if you were to simply look up why are port workers going on strike, you'll see a whole variety of news sources giving pretty much the same answer. And this is strictly pertaining to the East and Gulf Coast workers. As it turns out, their current minimum wage, their starting wage, is only $20 an hour. That amounts to only $41,000 annually if they were to work a 40-hour work week. And not only that, but their top pay happens to be just $39 an hour or $81,000 annually. A top pay of $81,000 annually compared to over $200,000 on the West Coast. So because East and Gulf Coast workers are feeling underpaid compared to their West Coast counterparts, they refuse to work at their ports and obviously went on strike, demanding over a 70% wage increase. The demands that they are making are for a $44 an hour starting pay, which amounts to $91,000 per year. Starting pay obviously meaning first-year workers. And then after 6 years of working, they want $69 an hour or $143,000 per year if they were to work 40-hour work weeks. Running the numbers of these demands and the number of workers on strike, amounting to about 45,000 people in total, I decided to calculate 143,000 times 45,000, and I came to the answer of $6.4 billion a year. And if they were to include every single member of the ILA, which amounts to 85,000 people, that number bumps up to $12.1 billion a year that the USA has to pay their port workers in the East and Gulf coasts. And that's also not to mention their fear of 15 to 30% of their job loss due to automation. After all, you know, there's a lot of robots, AI, etc. Things like that. Now, this does seem like a very, very extreme demand on a surface level. But setting aside the fact that West Coast workers are getting paid over $200,000 annually, and a few of them are upwards of over $300,000 annually, and also setting aside the fact that port workers are having to work grueling hours at these ports, working with expensive machinery to move cargo from boats to ports, and vice versa, why don't we take a look at how much exactly this is costing America and how it's going to affect us if these demands are not met. According to Valuetainment in their video on this regard, just one port alone being shut down for even a single day can result in a total loss of $600 million. That is just one port, and there are dozens of ports all over the East and Gulf coasts, meaning that according to my calculations, the daily loss from all these ports combined would not only amount to up to $5 billion with a B every single day, but it would also result in the loss of nearly half of all the USA imports, 43% to be exact. And to save us some time to show you what exactly that looks like, let's play you a snippet of Valuetainment's video talking about all the different companies that are directly affected by these ports.
This is legit. Now, how will you be affected by it? Well, let's go through these things. What products will be affected by it? When you look at the top importing companies exposed to this strike, just in the last 12 months, you'd have Walmart, IKEA, Samsung, Bob's Discount Furniture, LG, Home Depot. Look at the list of names. Amazon, General Motors, Michelin, Heineken, Pepsi. Then, if you go to the different ports, this one's New York and New Jersey, GM, Globus, LG, Samsung, again, Heineken, Continental Tire, Volkswagen, IKEA. You see the names. You may shop at these places. The one in Virginia, Walmart, IKEA, QVC. You got Ace Hardware, Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, Home Depot. These are things you and I buy. This is the one at Savannah. Savannah, you'll see again Walmart. You'll see again Hyundai, IKEA, LG, Electronics. A lot of the similar names. Amazon again. You know, this next one is Houston. People are being affected by it.
It really is such a shame that America has become so dependent on imports from other countries in order to keep society going. I mean, look at this. Walmart's being affected, Amazon's being affected, GM and all the other car companies, pharmaceutical companies are being affected by this, phone companies, the list goes on and on. Do you want to know what this is going to look like? It's going to look even worse than when there was a toilet paper shortage during the beer virus pandemic, where people were fighting each other to get cartfuls of toilet paper. Shelves will be empty, just like in a third world country supermarket. That is, if this continues. But luckily for us, it seems like these port strikes may not continue after all. Recent news came out, and according to APnews.com, some 45,000 dock workers at East and Gulf Coast ports are returning to work after their union reached a deal to suspend a strike that could have caused shortages and higher prices if it had dragged on. The ILA is suspending its 3-day strike until January 15th to provide time to negotiate a new contract. The union and the U.S. Maritime Alliance, which represents ports and shipping companies, said in a joint statement that they have reached a tentative agreement on wages. A person briefed on the agreement said that the ports sweetened their wage offer from about 50% over 6 years to 62%. The person didn't want to be identified because the agreement is tentative. Any wage increase would have to be approved by union members as part of the ratification of a final contract. So at this point, I guess it's safe to breathe somewhat of a sigh of relief, but there is a possibility that these strikes could pop up once again in January. So make sure to keep an eye on that in case this pops up ever again. And one more time, just to drive home how minuscule the demand cost is compared to the loss, let's take a look at those numbers again and take a look at the $6.4 billion annually to the $12.1 billion annually if all the demands were met for the East and Gulf Coast workers. What I neglected to tell you about those numbers is that this is the max demand cost if every single worker on the East and Gulf Coasts were to be paid $69 an hour or $143,000 annually. We already know that not every port worker in these places has worked over 6 years. So there is no way that these demand costs could possibly surpass $6.4 billion to $12.1 billion if every member of the ILA was included. So let's say in 1 year the USA does have to pay a max of $12.1 billion to these port workers. Using common sense, would you rather have to spend $12.1 billion in a single year, or lose up to $5 billion in a single day? That should drive home how minuscule the cost is per year compared to the loss that has accumulated in the past few days. In my humble opinion, between all the numbers that we've showcased with the East, Gulf, and West Coast port workers, as well as the very nature of these port jobs and how expensive their equipment is and how dangerous it can be, I really do think that their pay raise should be met. Their demands should be met. But in case you all think differently in the comments down below, please do let me know. All that being said, please make sure you subscribe, hit that thumbs up button and notification bell if you enjoyed this news report, and always remember, CSO family, to observe from a common sense perspective.